All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. And thank you so much to everyone joining us at home tonight, too, for our first ever Survivor Series event. At the end of each speaker's story tonight, after they have finished sharing with us, we want to open it up and have each of you to feel free to ask questions if you have questions for them. We also ask that everyone take a moment to silence their cell phones right now. Thank you so much. Tonight, we gather to listen. We gather to receive the stories of people who have struggled and persevered through some of the greatest injustices, disappointments, and lonelinesses in life. Infertility, cancer, miscarriage, racial discrimination, domestic violence, homelessness. We gather to be renewed, strengthened, and fortified as we live along our own journeys of struggle, joy, and beauty laid bare. Tonight, as we connect with others and realize our internal similarities despite differing external appearances, may we continue to discover what it means to be human. Thank you to our sponsors, Montgomery Bank and the Freeman Clinic, as well as our host, One City, for believing in the importance and power of sharing our stories, for working to ensure our stories of endurance are told here in our community. Thank you to each of the people willing to share their stories tonight, for the boldness, humility, and generosity of your honest words. And thank you to each of you who are here to receive the words of another. May we be changed, made better by these survivor stories.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay? My name is Tyson Jagers, and this is my beautiful wife, Christine, and this is our newest addition, Paige. We're up here to tell our story about the journey and the road we traveled in trying to build the family that we have. It wasn't as easy as we would have expected it to be. There were emotions felt that I think both of us could agree we probably never thought we would have felt before. But I think in the end we've turned out better versions of ourselves for that. I'm going to let Christine tell you kind of the journey that we went through.
So our journey began about a year after we got married. We decided we'd move out to find our dream home and start our dream family, thinking, nothing less of it. And so we did begin our journey, begin our family. We found out pretty quickly that there were some issues that we were going to have to face, not realizing how big of issues and I guess how long and the struggles and, everything you'll have to go through. But I'd reach out to my doctor because we were trying, of course, to create her, and I wasn't menstruating. So, trying to work around that. And I was like, well, I haven't for, it's probably been over a year. We've always had, been irregular. And they're like, well, I told the doctor before, but it wasn't a big deal because we weren't trying. Like, well, let's get you in, get you some blood work and figure out what's going on. So we, again, found out right away that basically I wasn't producing any hormones on any side of it. Things weren't talking to each other, basically. My body was kind of going, basically, into menopause is what was happening. Kind of sum it up in the long run. So right away began hormone therapy. So we were doing everything from patches to pills to gels to every weird thing you could think of. And again, nothing was happening at all. We would do blood work and still nothing and nothing. Until we kind of exhausted our resources there. The doctor's like, we can't do any more. Nothing's working. So they referred us to go to a fertility clinic up in St. Louis. So we went up there, my husband went with me, and they were kind of trying to explain, like, well, you can't do IVF because you're not producing this, and this body isn't listening to that. Basically, it was just a mess. Nothing was listening to each other. But they suggested a few things when, of course, expense came along. Because it's a little pricey with everything. We'd have to go up there a couple times a week, from blood work to all sorts of therapies, to shots of hormones. So I was like, well, I can, I'm healthy. My body can do this on its own. My whole life, I've been trying to do everything to take care of my body, so my body would take care of me. I didn't think much of it. So I was like, we started things at home. I started doing fertility smoothies with, gosh, everything inside of that thing. We did acupuncture. You really had to suck them down. So every morning started with that. We would do acupuncture, foot reflexology, gosh, anything under the moon we could think of. And then, of course, all your friends are there to support you, and everyone kind of becomes experts at that time. They all try this, try keto, try, more water, outside walking. It's because you do chemicals at your house. We try to get rid of chemical. It's just one thing after another. You're trying, you start to think, well, maybe it's my fault. I'm doing this. And then again, after months and months and months of nothing, we decided to go back with the St. Louis route. So that's when we begin that journey of driving up there about twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. And we were getting a little bit there. It's pricey, but we were having progress and things were looking upward. We still kept, oh, you can take her, yeah. Sorry. Sorry. So after heading up there, we were seeing a little bit of progress. So we were so hopeful after months and months and months of this. And my gracious husband, he would do shots for me every single night. We'd have to do one on the right side, one on the left side, right, left, right, left. So after a while, you're hitting those same spots. And it gets painful, but in the end, you just keep your eye on the prize. It's going to be worth it, going to be worth it. And things were looking great, finally making progress after, I guess, almost a year of that. And then the doctor called. We were going to do it the next day. We were going for IUI then, and the next day was our goal. So he called on the way home after I left thinking things were perfect, and they said to stop everything. For some reason, we were all the way there, and then the body just collapsed. We didn't know what was wrong. We lost all hormones. The lining basically dropped, and they told us to stop everything. I think that was definitely the moment that I lost hope. I remember I was in St. Louis when they called because I just left the clinic. And I stopped where I was. It was an outside mall, and I just walked back and forth for about 2 hours because, honestly, I was scared to death to come home to tell him that, I felt like I failed. We had this dream family, and it was my fault that I couldn't carry on the family, and everything. I felt like, I'm not to blame, but in the end, you kind of blame yourself. What did I do wrong? Why doesn't God want us to have a family? And you start thinking about other options, but if he didn't want us to have a family, maybe we shouldn't adopt. And, it just, in the end, he put a lot of blame on you. And I came home, and I finally kind of worked up the courage to kind of tell him, they told us to stop. Like, I guess we're done? Like, what do we do now? And I remember he was there to help me, and he's like, well, I mean, in the end, why not keep going? We had progress. And especially after all the costs in the end, he said, well, what's a couple more $1,000? It gets expensive. But if we don't spend that money, then, well, what are we going to do with it? We might as well keep trying for our dreams. So finally, after him talking us up and encouraging me, always remind me it's not me. It's, not my fault. He was there to help me out. So we finally began our journey again. And from there, it just seems like everything was perfect. We were so close to giving up. After that, gosh, I don't even think it was a couple months into it. And then all of a sudden it worked. We did our, IUI, and she came after that try. So we got pregnant, and from there it was just perfect. I guess we just needed to hit rock bottom. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I think probably one of the wildest parts of it was, being told by the doctors that you need to quit. When throughout the whole time we're doing shots and her body's changing, things are happening, so it's doing something, but yet they tell us to quit. It's like we have our whole lives to save money if we don't have kids. So what's money when it comes to getting what you really want? So it's like we'll spend every penny and give it everything we have, and that's when it happened. And I said earlier, we hit, there were emotions that we both felt throughout the whole thing, beginning, middle, and end. And it's those emotions in the middle, whenever you really felt like it wasn't going to happen. Your whole life, I feel like you unconsciously grow up, go into school, you get a job, and you're constantly trying to better yourself to create a family and raise it. And whenever you start thinking that might not happen, you start wondering why am I still trying to push forward and better myself if I'm not doing it for my family? And it was just, they're weird emotions that you really wouldn't think you'd ever think about, but those emotions flip pretty quick once Christine gave me the news that we were having a kid, and that's when everything went completely the opposite direction. It was pretty awesome. I think that pretty much sums it up. Questions? Yes. Yes.
Did you feel like giving up?
You want to answer that?
That time when they did call me, because after months and months of trying and they just said stop, I was exhausted. That moment just completely killed me. I thought about giving up. I thought about, why not us? Especially when you see people getting pregnant who you didn't even want the kids, and it just seems, I guess when you're going through it, you realize everyone's pregnant. Everyone in the mother's pregnant. So that was definitely one moment that I thought about giving up. Until, gosh, he's so supportive. Until he was, there. He's always so strong and never to put blame on me, and just said, why would we stop trying? Let's. And that's the moment that I decided that thought was gone real quick.
And that kind of in the same boat. As long as we had the money to spend on trying, why give up? And then our parents were very supportive. I remember one of the coolest things my dad told me. He said, "At being a parent," he said, "being a parent, you want to help your kids." And he said, "These are the times when I can really help and I can make a difference in your life. And if you guys get to the point where you can't financially do what you need to," he said, that's when I'm stepping in," which was really cool. Yes.
I know a couple who went through this more than once.
Mm-hmm.
So do you all plan to try to have another child? Or?
We're trying.
We are trying, and I think I've come to grasp that we might have to try to do it again. And right now, I don't know we don't know how far we want to push it this time, but we will try again, and we'll go through some of the shots again. I don't like poking her necessarily with the needles every night, so.
I appreciate it so much.
Any other questions? Perfect. Thank you for having us.
Hey everybody, my name is Nate Gautier. Guitar, Goater, Gautier, I'll probably turn around for anything. Really thankful to be here tonight, and looking forward to hearing from everybody. I just want to say thank you to the Russ Media and the sponsors and everybody that showed up to listen to our stories. So this is me and my wife's story. In 2019, I often tell people I probably cried more tears than when I was an infant. Back into 2018, October, about this time, I was taking a shower, and I got out of the shower and I noticed this small little nodule on one of my testicles. And, as most men do, especially stubborn men like me, I waited 2 weeks and I hoped that it went away. And so I took another shower, did an examination. When I noticed that it did not go away, I didn't take it very well at all. So at the time, I was a regional manager of an insurance broker in Perryville, and I drove up 55 and I cried, dried it up and walked inside. And what was really convenient is that at the time I had this window on my office. I worked in a bank, and so it was really convenient if the receptionist could see that I was on the phone or with some clients. She could walk by and kind of raise her hand and come back whenever I was available. Not so convenient when you're crying. And so I was on the phone with my wife, and I was really, really panicking, and I felt like I was like hyperventilating, and I was like, I have testicular cancer, and I know that's what it is, and I don't know what to do, and she has a hope that you all are able to see through our story is that my wife is a calm to my storm. And so she said, "What can I do to help?" And I said, "Well, schedule me an appointment." She said, "Okay." And I'll never forget getting off the phone with the lady that I scheduled the appointment with, and she said, "Okay, well, we can't get you until November 28th. And this was about a month and a half out. And I thought, wow, that's a long time. And I said, well, don't you know what's wrong? She goes, no, the doctor will take care of it when he sees you. Click. Well, within that month and a half, that little pea-sized nodule actually grew to 2 sizes the size of my testicle. So I get in to see the doc, and near the end of the appointment, he was very suave, very cool about it. I had told him, hey, I've got this thing. If you could check it out, I'd really appreciate it. He acknowledged it and went on. Near the end of the appointment, he said, okay, why don't we stand up and drop him? And he checked, and he goes back to his computer, and he says, anytime we have something on our private, we probably want to get some pictures. So that day, he sent me to the radiology center, and I had a very human moment with the radiology tech that had taken the pictures. And as we're walking down this long white hall, after she had completed the pictures for me, she put her hand on the back of the small of my back. And there's these 2 double doors, this long white hall with these 2 double doors. And as she puts her hand on my back, she goes, good luck. And for me, that was a moment that I will always look back to and be so thankful for. Because what she was doing is she was preparing me. She wasn't the radiologist. She couldn't read the report, but she knew. She knew that she had seen something. The next day, the doc calls me, and he goes, hey, Nate, that thing that's down there really shouldn't be there, and we want to get you in to see the specialist, but the thing is, we can't get you in before the end of the week. And did you say that your marathon was this weekend? I don't know about you guys, but I don't know many medical doctors that seem panicked, much less stutter when they speak. And I said, yeah, the marathon's this weekend. He said, okay, well, go and run your race, and we'll see you first thing on Monday. Got to see the specialist in the afternoon. It's booked. Be there. So I went with my sister and one of my close friends. We ran the St. Jude Marathon, and then came back on Monday morning and walked into the urologist's office at this point, and I'm in the waiting room, and I'm filling out paperwork, and I'm just angry. And I remember just like writing down, this is my name, my date of birth. I was like, this doesn't make sense. I'm not the guy. I was 28 years old at the time. And my wife, as I told you, such a sweet soul, she walks in, and she can tell I'm just upset. And she goes, are you okay? I said, I'm just angry. And as you'll learn, my wife and I, we have this really cool relationship where we just joke with each other. And so we walked back into the doctor's office, and we're waiting to see the urologist, and we're cracking jokes. And I'm like, oh, they're probably going to have to cut it out. And she's giggling, and 5 minutes later, the doctor walks in. He excuses my wife for an examination. And as he's examining, he says, do you have any pain? I said, no, I don't have any pain. No pain at all. He's like, I get dressed. He invites my wife back in, and he looks at me, and he goes, you need to go into immediate surgery tomorrow morning for removal of the testicle at 6 a.m. Now, guys, you have to understand that a big part of me and my wife's story is self-denial, me denying what was happening and not being able to accept it. And so my answer, very candidly, was quite cocky. I said, well, doc, that really doesn't work for me. I've got some stuff going on at work. How about 2 weeks? And his face kind of became white. And he looked at me in this ghost-like state, and he shook his head, and I'll never forget the way he just looked into my eyes, and he goes, you don't want to wait on this. You don't want to wait on this. So my wife, as she does, as she's always looking out for me, she helps schedule the surgery. The next morning, we show up to get it done, and it's about 5:30, 5:45. And again, I'm not tracking. I'm not taking into consideration the severity of the situation. And I'm, again, cracking jokes. I'm taking selfies with my wife. Last two ball picture. Being an idiot. Please laugh. You're welcome to. Helps me. and we go and we get it done, and then they send it off to biopsy, right? And a week later, I'm sitting in that same office where I was crying with her on the phone, and the doc calls. And he goes, "Hey, Nate, looks like we've got some testicle cancer, and I might have to do some treatments, so I'm going to have to refer to you to oncology." He goes, "It's called embryonal carcinoma, and there's only about 2 to 3% of people that are diagnosed with this strand, and if it were an animal, it'd be a meaner one." Great, I thought. Like, of course I have the bad one. So about this time, it's Christmas, right? December 2018, we're getting very close to the holidays. And we go to oncology, and I'm thinking, again, because I'm just not accepting that it's me. I can't be the guy. I'm in the best shape of my life. I ran a marathon 2 weeks ago. Drink a gallon of water a day. This doesn't make sense. The oncologist looks across the room from me and he says, "I think you need to complete 20 cycles of chemotherapy. You're going to be really sick. You'll lose all your hair. And if you have an insurance policy, you probably want to talk to your HR because you might have to go out on disability." And I'll never forget looking at him and being straight across the room and just going, "Doc, this doesn't make any sense. Like, I'm literally dumbfounded by what you're saying right now." And so then I had to go and get a port surgery. They put a port right in here to my body so that I could accept the medications, and they would pump through one of the main veins. There's this long silicone piece that connects to one of the main veins of your heart. It would pump the medication, the chemotherapy, the saline throughout my whole body. And I can't speak as I'm leaving this appointment. I really can't. We walk out, and I sit down next to my wife, and every time my wife asks me a question, I just kind of look at her and shake my head. Yes, okay. And within 24 hours, I can't explain what happened other than the fact that I literally freaked out and could not move forward with everything that we had just set in place. I was going to get my port surgery, let it heal, start January 7th, 2019. And I just needed to stop. I needed to pause. So I called back. I canceled my port surgery. I called the oncologist. I told him, "I'm not ready for chemo. I cannot do this. I'm not ready." And I took a week off. And I just thought. And I went out in the woods. And I screamed at God. And I told everybody that I'm not sure this is what I need to do. And after a week, after seeing the pain and the anguish of what I was putting my wife through and my family, I realized it wasn't about me. It was about all of us. So I decided I would do chemotherapy and I would move forward with treatment. I called back. I rescheduled a port surgery. I said, "When can you get me in? Can I still start chemo?" They said, "No, you're behind on schedule now. You'll have to start chemotherapy on January 14th. A week later, you'll get your surgery for your port on a Thursday. You'll start on that Monday." So on January 14th, 2019, I started chemo. January 14th was my birthday. I had told my family, I don't want to talk about my birthday on this day. I'm going to work 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, chemotherapy. 1 week on, 8 to 5, 2 weeks off, and repeat 4 times. And I can't explain to you guys what happened other than after the first week of chemotherapy, it literally wrecked me far worse than I could have imagined. And I have this story that I always result back to, and I call it my pain on the wall story. My wife and I had to isolate from one another. So she had to sleep in her bed. I had to sleep in the guest room because if I was to sweat and the chemotherapy was to get onto her, it could make her sick. If I was to use the restroom, I had to flush twice. It was something very, very surreal to experience. And I'm laying there, my wife's at work, and I've got my head just kind of on the wall. I'm looking at this kind of moth gray paint that we have in the guest room. And I'll never be able to describe it the best of what happened in that moment. But I said, okay, God, you can have it all. Audibly, out loud. You can have the nausea, the anger, the anxiety, the worry. And on, I just let go. And it was the most amazing moment of just feeling like God came up behind me and hugged me and said, come here, you idiot. Let's do this together. And it wasn't that every moment was easier. It wasn't that everything was wonderful from that moment on, but it was different. There was something advocating for me to keep going. You know what's interesting is when you are a cancer patient, so I'm a year and a half clean, cancer-free. But when you're a cancer patient, you don't know how much is too much to tell. Because you're always very, very vivid on timelines of what has happened. November 28th, see the doctor. Next day, get a call, he's concerned. December 3rd, see the specialist. December 4th, go in for the removal of the testicle. And on and on and on, the memories just stack. And so as we get through this time of me losing my hair and laying on the couch, I remember there came a time where my wife actually had to bathe me. On the weeks of infusion, I'd have this port hanging out of my body, and you can't shower on the weeks of infusion because it's a sterile site. And she would draw a bath, help me out of bed, and help me get cleaned. And then I'd go to work. I'd go to chemo. I think when your ego gets suffocated and your independence is kind of stricken and taken from you, you really, and I hope cancer always teaches me this, and I always get to go back and know that it was a positive that happened. But you start to see what's important in life. What's important in life is friends, is God, is family. And so, as I wrap up here, I want people to know that if you're going through a situation or you're headed into one or your family member is, you gotta let people in. I was really, really stubborn. And I did not know how to let my wife help me. I did not know how to rest. I did not know that there were people that were also hurting because I couldn't think about anybody but me. And you've got a brother, you've got a son, you've got an uncle, you've got a dad. This disease typically goes after adolescents, boys ages 12 to 26. This year the stats changed, it's ages 15 to 55. So tell them to check themselves. Very, very real. Tell them to check their balls. It's okay. It's okay. Go home. Let them know. This was a pea-sized nodule that could have turned into something really, really ugly, but thankfully, in our case, we made it through. I can't wait to hear you guys' stories. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Nicole Pirtle, and I'll just be honest with all of you. I'm an early childhood teacher by trade, so speaking to little kids is a whole lot easier than speaking to adults. So I wrote out my story, so I'm going to read my story because I want to stay on time and be able to answer questions. My name is Nicole Pirtle. Sounds like turtle, but not spelled the same. Yes, it's unique. My family and I live here in Jackson, Missouri. My number one supporter is here with me tonight, and that's my husband, Merlin, as a part of the Survivor Series, as the other two families have already shared. It's not just the person who experiences, it's the family. Those are survivors as well. He and I have walked this journey together for almost 20 years. We miscarried twin boys, Colton and baby Purtle, on November 27th, 2000. And another boy, Kendrick Purtle, on October 21st, 2002, which yesterday was actually his birthday. He would have been 18. Our boys were born days before the 20-week mark, classifying their birth and their death as miscarriage. But that doesn't make the death any easier. As a parent, losing a child at any age is nothing short of heart-wrenching. In my early 20s, my doctor diagnosed me with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is a disease that causes infertility as well as a myriad of other symptoms, one of them including preterm labor, hence why I miscarried 3 times. After our twins were born, my specialist determined that I also had incompetent cervix. Yay me, not only do I have PCOS, now I have something else. That had also been a contributing factor to the miscarriages. After we conceived our next son, my doctor placed a cerclage to hopefully hold our son in my womb until he would be able to live outside of my body because, as I said, preterm labor, my doctors assured me that I would probably never carry full term. Unfortunately, preterm labor was still an issue, and he was also born prematurely at 19.5 weeks, almost 20 weeks. He lived for approximately 2 minutes. We held him and told him hello, goodbye, and how much he was loved. In those few moments, this is why you write things, the grief we felt threatened to swallow us. Those moments, those hours, those days, those weeks, following the death yet of another child, because we had now buried 3 babies. Many people walked this journey with us and truly were instrumental in keeping us from wallowing in the self-pity, the grief, and the depression. I wanted to wallow, let me tell you. There were days I wanted to just crawl underneath the covers and never come out. But that I knew was not healthy physically. It wasn't healthy emotionally, spiritually, any of that. So being able to share their lives with others allowed us to move forward through the grief. Our families rallied around us and gave us space to grieve and talk when we felt it necessary about our sons. We were also introduced to the SHARE program at Southeast Hospital after both of our deliveries. The SHARE nurses were the most kind, gentle, loving, and compassionate people that I have probably ever met. They took photos of our sons, they did plaster castings of their hands and feet, and made suggestions on how to remember our sons and treated us as any other parents. We were no less in their eyes. Our boys were just as important as a living full-term child born and were treated as such. After our 3rd son, Kendrick, was born, we were invited to SHARE meetings that were held at the hospital for parents who had also miscarried children or had a child die in stillbirth or other complications. Meeting with those other parents and finding solace in their grief as well as our grief was hard, because you don't want anyone else to experience what you're experiencing. You don't want that to happen for anybody. But unfortunately, it does happen. We weren't the last. We won't be the last. There'll be more to come. That was a comfort to us because we felt like we could share their names, our experience, because that's all we had. We had nothing else. We unfortunately knew we were not alone, and in our feelings. But most of all, our faith in God and His confirmation that their lives are valued. I think that's probably what carried me the most, that we would meet them one day in heaven, that we will meet them. I look forward to that day. That was probably the most comforting thing for me, that even though they were born early and they were tiny and they were small, that their life mattered. So here we are, 20 years later. Do you grieve just for a short period of time? Do you grieve forever? Our experience is grief is a journey. You don't just get over it, you move through it. My husband and I were gifted with 2 healthy girls after our sons. God was gracious and gifted us with Madeline Grace, who's 16, and Jocelyn Hope, who is 12. They're truly, truly a blessing to our lives, but they're not a replacement. You don't replace people ever. And we didn't just move on. We do move forward. Our daughters are aware of their brothers, and we have openly shared our journey with them from the beginning. We celebrate our sons on their birthday with balloons, cake, and usually dinner out. We went out last night and took balloons to the cemetery because that's where we get to go. We have done many different things through the years as well, other things to celebrate. We hang ornaments on our Christmas tree in honor of their lives, and their ornaments are always placed at the top. We walk the Share Walk each year. They each have a keepsake shelf in our entertainment center with their photos, castings of their hands and feet and other small gifts that were given to us after they were born, because we always want them to have their place, to not be hidden away, so that others know that their life mattered. I wear a necklace most every day that has our family tree on it with our names listed around it and 3 hearts to signify each of them. It helps me remember that they are always a part of me. I also have a tattoo on my right foot with 3 butterflies and then their initials. Those are just a few ways that we remember them. There are many, many other ways to remember children. And as I said, it's been 20 years, so even now there's more, with more technology, more things that you can do to remember your child. So how do you support someone who has or will experience miscarriage or the death of an infant child? Be a listener. As a survivor, that's my advice. You don't need to say anything. Allow the person, whether it be the parent, the grandparent, the aunts, the uncles, the sisters, those are the people that are experiencing the grief just as much. Allow them to share with you how they feel, their anger, their sadness, the fear, and all those feelings that go along with that. You can't fix this, but you can be compassionate. You can show empathy, and you can show love. Allow them the space to grieve and not judge the length of time or how they grieve. The journey for each person is personal, and there is no time limit. Our family will carry the grief of our sons until we meet them in heaven. The grief is different now, 20 years later, but it is still there. We're never able to experience the parenting first with our sons, and when those dates come around, it still stings, and it is a reminder of them. I think about that Kendrick would be a senior in high school this year, and I'd be planning all of the senior stuff. We'd be doing senior photos, all those things. And when someone is grieving and they lose a child 18 years ago, 20 years ago, other people move on. But for you, those things come around. So give grace, allow the family to say their names aloud, and share their lives. Because one of the things that we say at Share, and thing that was so important to me, is Dr. Seuss says, a life is a life, no matter how small. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Good evening. I'm Loretta Prater. I'm an author, community advocate, former university administrator, but most of all, I am a mother. And that's my theme for tonight, to talk about motherhood as part of my journey. I want to thank all of those who are responsible for this event. I think it's very, very important and very, very significant. And I'm just overwhelmed just hearing from the others already. On January 2nd, 2004, my husband Dwight and I received that phone call that no parent wants to receive. It's the dreaded phone call. And that is the call that we got that said that our oldest son, Leslie, was dead. And I had a long conversation with him just the day before. So, this was shocking, to say the least, because he was not ill. So from that moment, I began a journey a journey that I could never have imagined ever being on. And when I was contacted to speak on this event, I was asked to talk about my journey for survival. But as Leslie's mother, I can tell you I haven't arrived yet. And I don't know if I ever arrive because it's a daily struggle. We know that death is a part of the life cycle, and we'll all reach that at some point. But as parents, we never expect to bury our children. And we know that there have been many tragic experiences for people who've outlived their child. We just heard from Nicole just a minute ago. So we understand that a lot of us outlive our children. So that path, even though it's tragic, it's also very personal, and it's not necessarily the same for everyone. There are probably some similarities, but I wouldn't venture to say that my pain is any greater or less than anyone else's pain who's had to go through this as a mother, or any of the others who received that dreaded phone call. And yes, children have died from a lot of different reasons. And seems like lately, because of automobile accidents, suicides, gun violence, and then those awful school shootings, more and more parents are faced with this sudden death of their child. So several years ago, my husband and I, Dwight, with one of our friends from Cape Girardeau, Connie Hale, traveled to attend a conference called Parents of Murdered Children. And there were so many of us at that conference, and so many sharing each other's pain. And they experienced a lot of heartache, just like we did. But it seems like to me, the fact that at that conference, those parents had an extra burden. And of course, we were among those parents. And that was that someone willfully ended the life of your child. So Connie and I, as mothers of unarmed sons, have also had to deal with the fact that persons who ended Leslie's life and persons who ended her son's Derek's life were those who were expected to serve and protect them. They were police officers. Connie is a white mother, and you can see I am a black mother. And we have become very close friends, because I can tell you that grief does not discriminate. So the question I'm here to answer is, how am I surviving? I consider my journey towards survival is comparable to taking a trip. And of course, you know, when you do, there are many paths that you could take to get to the same place. But numerous resources are needed. So years ago, after discussing my survival struggles with another mother who had entered the journey long before I said to her, how do you deal with burying your son? How did you do it? And she said, you learn to live with the pain. It never goes away, but somehow you manage to keep breathing. So as Leslie's mother, I will share with you my personal journey of struggling towards survival. These matters of grief are very, very personal. As most of you probably already know, I have my journey. His dad has his journey. His brother has his journey. Because those dyads are very different. They're very unique. And one of the things that I found for my journey, relationships. That's what has really supported me and has upheld me. Now, the first relationship that's been most significant to me is my relationship with God. And I have a strong faith, and I know that God has provided me the strength to even put one foot before the other every morning to get out of bed and go along with my activities for every day. It has been that strength from God. And then I've had a support system of others around me, relatives, friends, colleagues. And after all these years, even though I've been retired now for 8 years, I still have colleagues, former colleagues, who still support me, and friends that I haven't heard from maybe in years. When George Floyd was killed, and he was killed in a way very similar to my son, in that there were 4 police officers who prevented him from breathing. 4 police officers prevented my son from breathing. I got so many unanticipated phone calls, emails, greeting cards, text messages, and some of the people I hadn't heard from in years, but they said when they saw what happened to George Floyd, they immediately thought about me and our family. So I will tell you, when Leslie was murdered, I was blessed with a wonderful group of colleagues at Southeast Missouri State University, especially those in the College of Health and Human Services, because at that time I was their dean. But we'd only lived in Cape Girardeau less than 2 years, so many people in the area didn't even really know us that well, but that didn't seem to matter. They really rallied around us. And our lives ended. When we got that phone call, our lives ended as we knew it, and we have never been the same since. So through faith, I strongly believe that there are many resources that have helped me that were not of my own doing. In fact, some of these were perfect strangers. But I really do believe that there are angels among us. You don't see them necessarily flying around with wings in white garments, but they are there, and I really believe it, because it seems like even before I needed something, God put somebody in my path to help me. And see, I have my little angel right here that I'm wearing today. And someone asked me once to do a demonstration and talk about my angel collection. And I said, I don't have an angel collection. And they said, yes, you do. And so when I went around the house to get all the angels up for that presentation, I said, yeah, I guess I do have a collection. I didn't even realize it. But there were just so many angels, I would say, that were placed in my path. And in fact, my pastor in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and that's our hometown, and it's also the place where Leslie was killed, he told me that God had chosen me for this fight for justice. And he said, because you can do some things that some of the other mothers haven't been able to do. And I debated with him, and I said, well, he should have talked to me first, and we could have, arranged something else. Maybe I could have been a missionary or something. I didn't want to sacrifice Leslie. But then after a while, and I saw that so many doors are being opened, and I was being helped in so many ways, I had to go back and contact him and say, I think you were right. And I think there's something that he wants me to do that some of the other mothers haven't been able to do, because I had some resources that they didn't have. So some of the other things that I use personally in this struggle towards survival, prayer constantly, meditations, listening to music, reading, exercising, all of those things have helped me. And these are also strategies that help people when they're dealing with perpetual stress. And bearing a child, from my experience, is ongoing stress. So daily, I think about Leslie all the time, morning, noon, and night, in good times, not so good times, in beautiful summer weather, because he loved sunshine, And I think about him in the rain. It's just like he's always there. He's always in my thoughts. And as a certified counselor, I was always told, I told other people, and I believe it myself, that when you are stressed out, one of the things that can help you is if you help other people, reach out to others, because then the focus is not so much on you. And so I thought, and I prayed about it, I said, well, how can I help? What is it that God is trying to get me to do? And so what happened, I started reaching out to other mothers. And this was 16 years ago when Leslie was killed, so at that time, a lot of people still had landlines. And when I see things in the newspaper or on the news, and I would just, hunt down these mothers, call them and introduce myself and just say, I'm here for you. I understand what you're going through. And even if it's just somebody to listen to them, I sensed that was very helpful, but it also was helpful to me. I've gone to a couple of grief groups, and that didn't do it for me, because it seems like I needed somebody who really had gone through similar experiences. And so we were able to help each other. I didn't judge them. They didn't judge me. I didn't try to vilify their child or anything of that nature. And as a lifelong educator, I started doing speaking engagements and telling people what happened. And I have been all over the country doing presentations about these issues. And I felt like Leslie's voice was silenced, and so many other Leslies, their voices were silenced because it was silence in death. But for those of us who are still living, and especially their family members, we have to continue to be their voice. So in the meantime, I kept saying, well, what else, God, do you want me to do? How can I get more of this information out? What is it that you're trying to get me to do? So it resulted in this book, Excessive Use of Force, One Mother's Struggle Against Police Brutality and Misconduct. And I guess that's another example of what my pastor was trying to tell me when he said, you can do some things that some of the other mothers cannot do. And there were very few mothers out there who had written a book about the experience of their child from police brutality. And the few books that I saw, mainly they didn't really write them. They had a ghostwriter, so to speak. But being in academia, I had written a lot. I had never written a book, though, but I'd written journal articles and book chapters and things of that nature. And I thought, well, yeah, I've never written a book, but I guess this is what God is telling me to do. And so it became bibliotherapy because it really helped me as I went through that process. And it took me 14 years to do it. And as I was going through it, and people who knew me knew I was writing this book, and every time they hear on the TV or radio or whatever that another person had been killed, another unarmed person killed by the police, they would call me, when are you going to finish that book? That book needs to be out right now. And finally I said, you know what? Unfortunately, it's happening every single day, so it appears. So whenever it comes out, it'll be the right time. So in traveling around and talking about these issues, it's amazing that sometimes people look at me and they said, I can't believe that happened to you. And I said, well, maybe at one time I would have thought the same thing. But now I know it could happen to me. It did happen to me. And I said, maybe what really scared them is because they identified with me. I didn't fit the stereotype that people had put out there about family members who go through this. And so they're thinking, well, if it could happen to Dr. Prater, gee, it might happen to me. And so as I look around the room, I will tell you that I believe the majority of police officers are good people. They uphold their oath to protect people and serve all people. And I know some of these folks like that, and some are relatives, friends, neighbors. But I said the majority. Now, what about the others who are not in that majority? And those are the ones that could harm any of us. It could happen to you. It could happen to you. It could happen to you. And my feeling is that none are free until we're all free. I want everyone to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We all deserve that, I think, regardless of your profession, regardless of your economic status or whatever. And I think that as a community and as a society, we could work toward that end, where we could all have this. Now, I have been just tormented by just what killed Leslie. Now, we have 2 autopsy reports that said it was position asphyxia. He was just not allowed to breathe. We have a death certificate that said he died from a homicide. And so I know those facts. But as I look deeper into what really caused his death, I decided, okay, I think I have the answer. It was evil. It was just pure, raw evil, along with its companion twin of hatred. I think that is what killed my son. So there's a poem that Leslie's brother Stephen wrote, and it's in this book. I'm going to read it to you, but also I want to tell you that the front of the cover, often people say, where did that come from? Where'd you get that picture? This is our youngest son, Stephen, visiting his brother's grave. And I tell people the picture is real. It's not something that the publisher sent me links to thousands and thousands of pictures that could have been on the front cover. And I said, no, the cover needs to have a message. Before people even open the book, they need to get a message. And so this is the message right here with Stephen visiting his brother's grave. So I'm going to read to you this poem, and you'll have a better feel of what Leslie was really like. And, you know, this is his picture, one of my favorite pictures of him. He had a beautiful smile, and he was always smiling. And everyone who talked about him, even people who said things at the funeral, they talked about his smile. So this poem is, "There will never be another you. Memories of you are all I have to get me through the day. Emptiness fills my soul now that you have gone away. I'm searching for any piece of you that I can hold on to. One thing is for sure, my brother, there will never be another you. As your little brother, I always let you lead the way. Throughout my life, you held my hand, making sure that I would never go astray. Who will be my guiding soldier now that you're not here to look up to? There's no one else, my brother, because there will never be another you. Certain people are out to portray you as a man who was filled with hate, but as your little brother, it's up to me to set the record straight. Anyone who knew you knew that you were a man full of life and filled with love. My brother, it's the real you we'll be thinking of. You touched the lives of all your family and friends for 37 years. We're all trying to be strong, even as we're fighting back the tears. There will never be another like you, my brother, for your life played like a melody reminiscent of a jazz tune. It was just over a week ago you and I were able to be together. We had so much fun and laughter. I wanted those moments to last forever. Your smile brightened the day of all your friends and all your family. There's no other like you, my brother Les. I love you, and you will forever live inside of me. We love you and miss you. Stephen Prater. Thank you. So I'm happy to entertain any questions if anyone has. Okay, thank you again.
Are you able to come to law enforcement?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. My name's Kyle Heisler. I'm a 25-year law enforcement professional.
Okay.
I very much appreciate your story and the experience that you had.
And so what's your question?
My question ultimately is do you have that opportunity to bring that story to law enforcement and the experience that you had on the other side of that some officers don't consider?
Okay, you were saying, I'm going to try to repeat what you said. You were asking if I had an opportunity to bring the story to law enforcement?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, I did, but I'll tell you what happened. We had to put it in a lawsuit in order for them to let me do it. And I did it in the academy of the Chattanooga Police Department, because during the process of dealing with them, we saw that they had so many errors. They made so many errors. Two of the police officers were rookies, and one of them in particular, we sat in on his deposition, he never even heard of position asphyxia. They weren't even training how to avoid position asphyxia. And, you know, of course, that was strange to me, because I think I learned maybe in the third grade that you had to breathe to live. But, you know, he claimed he'd never heard of position asphyxia, which I could believe that as far as that term, because I hadn't heard of it until Leslie was killed. But I felt like they needed some training, but I couldn't train them how to do tactical stuff. My thing was sensitivity training. They needed that. And so when I went in, I was allowed to do 3, even though I told them I would just do them indefinitely for the rest of my life. But they allowed me to do 3. The very first one, I was really nervous, though, because I thought, oh, you know, they're probably going to think, oh, here's this evil mother who sued us, you know, coming in here to teach us. But I felt like with my years as an educator, I knew how to teach. And one of the things that happened, too, is I mentioned earlier about God allowing me to do certain things that others couldn't do. When I was at the university at the time, when Leslie was killed, I was over the criminal justice department as part of my responsibility. And then also the regional police academy. I was over them. And so I knew a lot of stuff that they didn't think a typical mother would know. And so I did that. I did those 3 trainings, but the very first one, I would tell you, it was really interesting, because when I finished that first session, I said, are there any questions? And this really, he's probably the biggest person in the room, raised his hand. He was at the back of the room, and he stood up, and I thought, oh, no, here it is. I'm going to get blasted, you know. I'm trying to brace myself. And what he said was, I knew your son. We went to high school together, and he was one of the nicest people you ever want to meet. And I was looking around thinking, oh, do you realize how much courage it took for you to stand up there and say that to me? You know, because when you say something against police officers, then a lot of people say, oh, you know, you're the enemy. But that was one of the angels that God had put in there to say that. And then the other thing, I really do believe in education. And even the research says the more education and training that law enforcement officers receive, the less likely they are to use excessive force, because they can use critical thinking. They can use their brain. They don't have to use the critical force when their lives are not in danger, and you have a person you obviously can see is unarmed. But we started a scholarship in Leslie's name in the Department of Criminal Justice at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. And we received a very nice letter from the person who received the first scholarship. But he said that he was going to work in Nashville. And so before everyone left the room, as we were gathering up our materials, this young man approached me, and I didn't know him, but he told me who he was. He gave me his name. And when he said his name, I immediately recognized it as the person who had written us this nice note about the scholarship, and that he was able to finish his year because he had received the Leslie Von Prater Memorial Scholarship. And I was like, oh my God, what are you doing here? I thought you were going to be working in Nashville. And he said he decided that he would stay and work in Chattanooga. And so immediately we were hugging each other, we were tearing, and some of the other officers who were still, filing out of the room were looking like, what's going on there, But that was another situation, because I said that was another God situation, because I had said when we got this nice note from him, I said, I wish I could meet this young man. But I never thought that I could, because, I thought he would be in Nashville. But my thing is, I just want everyone to live. And I do believe that we have employed some people as police officers who never should have been in that role. There's a lot of good ones out there, and they are messing it up for everybody, in my opinion. For their own people. I've done a presentation with a former police officer who actually left. He had worked in St. Louis, but he left the force because he said that he couldn't take what he saw going on. He just couldn't do it. And so, in fact, I think the people that he was working with, they ran him into the ministry. So he's a minister now. But that's just to say that there are some people who should not be in those positions, and I think those are the ones that are causing the problems, because we really do have some good people who are police officers. And when we started that scholarship in the Department of Criminal Justice, we actually got some flack for that, because some people said, police kill your son, why would you want to give some scholarship money? And I said, so nobody else's son is going to be killed. That's the purpose. So that they would be educated before they get out there. And I have not, and this has been a choice, I have not done presentations to police departments. My preference is to work with the academy. And maybe I've seen too much TV, seen too many movies like Training Day. And I'm thinking, I want to get to them before some of those other people get to them out there, Because I think what had happened when I can go in and talk to these young people, and most of them are young people that I was talking to, maybe they could see, that could be my mother hurting like that, And I'm thinking maybe when they get out there, if they see someone else in trouble, like my son was in trouble because he was intoxicated and he was nude, he needed help. He didn't need for them to come and kill him. And hopefully, if they get in that situation, they would think about me, see my face or see Leslie's face. And just as you look at his face, he was just like that, smiling, happy, kind, all those things. Are there any other questions? And I would just tell you briefly, because people ask me this all the time, so in case anyone in here is interested, I will tell you that it's easy to get this book. Right now, the paperback copies are available at Barnes & Noble, right over there on Williams. They used to have the hard copies. I think they probably sent all the hard copies back that they had left over, but they do have some of the paperbacks. Oh, yes.
Did you receive any type of justice?
Okay, I'm having a hard time hearing.
Did you receive any type of justice for the loss of your son?
No. And some people get confused with money. They think money is justice. Money is just stuff. It's not justice. We received no justice. In fact, we didn't even receive peace of mind because the 4 officers involved were given a week off with pay, put back out there on the street, and that's before even any investigation was completed or anything. And I think what happened in our case, we didn't have a video. The way Leslie's body was treated and all those broken bones and things he had, I'm sure that there would have been an outcry if there had been a video. We had eyewitnesses, and then we have, 2 autopsy reports. We had to get 2 because I didn't trust the local people. And so we had his body sent to Nashville to have it re-autopsied by the state person. But they both came to the same conclusion that it was homicide by position asphyxia. But those officers, as far as I know, are still on the police force, and they settled the case. And we wanted to go to court. I said, I don't need the money because we have jobs. I'm not trying to, get money off of my son's death. So the reason we settled was because that was the only way we could get some concessions called injunctive relief. And otherwise, you just go to court and get money, but you don't get any changes. And so we said some things had to change. As I mentioned, one of those is that they had to let me teach in that academy. But otherwise, they wouldn't have allowed me to do it. So that's the other thing that torments me, that, these people are still on the force, probably being promoted, and they'll one day have nice retirement celebration without ever having to do anything as far as the death of our child. And, they took his life, but they took ours too. All right, thank you.
Well, thank you so much to everyone who has shared their story already this evening, and thank you to everyone to come. And thank you so much to you, Mitzi, for being here with us tonight to share your words.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So to start off, would you share with us a little bit about your journey with breast cancer?
Boy, my story seems so insignificant compared to what you felt, what you all have gone through. So thank you for taking the time to listen to what I have to say. I'm only here mainly because if I can help one person through this, then I've done my job. My breast cancer story started about 2 years prior to the actual diagnosis. I had ridden my bicycle home, and I was going to hang it up on the hook in the garage, and it fell, and it hit me in my left breast. And I was flat as a pancake, so any swelling was very noticeable. Had some swelling, went to the doctor, and they said, you'll be okay. Go home, take some medicine, put some ice packs on it. About 2 years later, I was in the gym, and I noticed some discharge out of my left breast. And my neighbor down the street happens to work for an OBGYN, and she was in the gym that night. And I said, hey, what do you think about this? And she said, you better get in. So she made me an appointment the next day. So I went in, and they did the manual exam, and the OBGYN said, I don't think this is an issue at all, but you haven't had a mammogram in about 5 years, so maybe we're going to send you over for a mammogram. So I went over and had the mammogram. Because I'd had the mammogram with the bicycle injury, they said, the doctor read it, and he said, I don't see anything that really gives me concern, but there's just on the outside chance there's a little mass, and I think it's from the other injury, but let's go have a biopsy just in case. So I went to have the biopsy, and I have to tell you, my husband was in Afghanistan at this time. So I had tried to keep all this on the down low to protect everybody and not put everybody in a panic. And the surgeon, when I met with him, he said, this is going to be similar to having a tooth pulled, really. This is no big deal. So I assured him that there was no reason to come home. We did the biopsy, and the surgeon came out and told my sister, I don't think it's anything. We've sent it off for a biopsy just as a matter of routine, but I really don't think it's anything. So I went about my business. I never really thought much more about it. My routine was this. Every morning between 8 and 8:30, maybe 9, I would wait for text messaging from my husband. So we were texting one morning, and I got a call. And I said, Danny, I got a call here. I don't recognize the number. He said, just take it. So I did. And the call, she said, Mrs. Seeger, how are you today? And I said, I'm just fine. She said, well, we got your biopsy back, and you have a little cancer. And I guess it's a knee-jerk to fall back to comedy, because I said, so is that like being a little bit pregnant? Because she said, no, it's not. So we need to get you in and meet with the doctor. So, okay. Then I had to tell him, and he was on a flight home that night to walk with me through this. So what happens when you have breast cancer is, the first thing is, well, where is it? Well, in mine, it was in the left breast. And I had always kind of laughingly thought, if I ever had a knot, it would be very noticeable, because, as I said, I was in training bras at 55. It's not so funny when it really happens. They said, it's in your left breast. And so the question was, do you want to do a bilateral mastectomy, or do you want to do a whole both, take them both? And you think you're going to say, well, hang on to what you got. And statistically, the cancer probably would not have ever appeared in the other one. But to be honest with you, I went to the plastic surgeon, and they said, the nurse said, look, he can match this, no doubt. You won't have any trouble. You'll never know that there will be no indication that you had a mastectomy. But in about 10 years, age will affect one and not the other. So you'll look. So purely out of vanity, I decided, okay, let's just take them both. And now I'm glad I did, because oddly, I'd always wanted a boob job. Careful what you're wishing for. So we had that decision, and I had the mastectomy with immediate reconstruction. And what that means is they put an empty balloon in there, and then they gradually blow, increase the size till you get to the size you want to be. And that delayed my chemo some, because I let them blow it up a little bit too big. I was a little bit... And so I started chemo a couple weeks late. My husband had to go back to Afghanistan, and I was facing this chemo. And I got to tell you, I laugh now, but the fear is gripping. You think, I'm a Christian. I know I'm going to heaven, but I don't want to go today. So you think in those terms, and then you think about the chemo. You think, how sick am I going to be? I'm here by myself. My 3 children are out on their own. They have their own lives. And in the end, you just have to face it. You have to take one step at a time and go in and get it done. So I did my chemo. I am glad to say I'm healthy. You never say you're cancer-free, but I am not presenting with any cancer at this point. Thank you.
Yeah. Will you tell us, I know whenever we had spoken earlier, you kind of talked about like your hardest day. And can you tell us about that and kind of how you got through that?
I had 2 days that were exceptionally tough. It was late in the summer, and I was mowing the yard. You know, when they tell you you're going to lose your hair, but you think, maybe not. So I'm mowing the yard, and I came around the corner, and I turned to see that I had followed the track, and I saw hair blowing out. I felt like God's dandelion. It was terrible. And I hate to say I'm so vain, but my gosh, losing your hair is an indicator everyone can see. You know, it's like admitting I'm sick. So I went, and the lady that has done my hair forever shaved my head. And I can't even begin to tell you what that's like. It was the admitting that you were sick, and this was going to be tough. So when I came home, you know, your head is baby's butt soft, and you come home and you're sitting in the recliner thinking, this is not me. I got to find something to do. So I decided, okay, I'm going to set my goal, count the days of chemo left and how long it'll be till I can get back in the gym. And I sent a message to my trainer and said, I'll be able to do this in November. Can you set me an appointment? And she said, I don't make appointments that far in advance. And I was crushed again. So, you can't get down here. Wallow around with the pigs in the mud, and you come out looking like a pig. I don't want to be the pig. So I decided I would make up my own workout. So I spent hours on Pinterest, you know, upper body, lower body, and how to make a fun. So that's how I got through that. Trying to be positive.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more kind of about that and kind of who or what helped you through with the whole process?
My husband helped me immensely. Every day he checked on me. The people at the cancer center helped me immensely. They want to help you. They are there to help you with anything. Did you know that a wig has another name? It's called a cranial prosthesis. Hey, look, I just met another goal. My children were an inspiration as well. My middle son has a full-time job. My other two are in college, or were at that time. And he would take off work to take me. In fact, he took me to my last chemo treatment and gave me this, which was one of my happiest days, to see that and look in the rearview mirror and see that cancer center behind you. There's something about that. It's behind you now. Yeah. So on the other side, I had people that would reach out to you and say, oh, my sister-in-law had chemo, and it was terrible. She threw up all the way, or she flatlined, or people tell you, don't listen to that. Don't listen to the negative. You've got to stay positive. And if you are dealing with someone with cancer, please don't tell them the bad stuff. They don't need to hear that. I'm telling you. They feel enough fear without you saying, this is going to be awful. Because it sucks. It does. It's not fun. But you can find good parts in all of it. I developed something called a gratitude list. I became grateful for God. My church, during the pandemic, my life didn't change much because I wasn't allowed to be out and about. I had to wear a mask, and if people came in, they had to take their shoes off. And so my life didn't change much at that point. But my church supported me because they put a seat in the very back of the church. And I was the last one in and the first one to leave, but I got to go to church. So I was grateful for that. I was grateful for little things like drive-through banks. I was grateful for the fact that I could go online and order a bunch of groceries and they'd bring it out to me. Because it allowed me to remain independent. And I think Nate spoke about losing your independence. It's important to do what you can do to stay independent and stay on a routine.
Yeah. And what kind of wisdom, we've already shared a lot, but what kind of wisdom?
Stay on the high road. Yeah. Stay on the high road. Find that high road and stay on it. Stay positive. Stay around people that are positive. If you are trying to help someone who's going through it, find the happy things. Help them find the high road, because there is one. I think that I survived this because I'm supposed to do something. I don't know what it is yet. My mom always told me that when bad things happen, it's not necessarily about you. Sometimes there's a bigger picture that we can't fathom, and you're just playing a role in it. And I think maybe that was it. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but maybe it was to be here tonight. I wrote a book one time. It was on how to sharpen a knife. Didn't sell very well. But anyway, thank you all for listening. I'll be glad to answer any questions about the garden. I don't know who's next. Okay.
Did anyone have any questions for Mitzi?
No. Here, I don't know who gets
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Those lights are bright. This is the first time I've done a speaker event like this. My name's Jennifer Abernathy. I was relating a lot to what Ms. Prater was saying about being a survivor. And normally when I do speaker events, I say my name's Jennifer and I'm an addict. I guess this ain't that kind of party. I am a survivor of early childhood sexual trauma. That is something that I have just recently decided to really dig in. And I always go, I make this little symbol, like I call it root digging. And I've suffered with substance abuse disorder my entire life, honestly. It took a horrendous drunken blackout, which I used to always think, I'm going to get drunk and find out what happens to me when I black out, which is just insane. But it took a horrendous drunken blackout for me to remember how that relationship with alcohol had developed. When I had a pretty decent childhood outside of the sexual trauma, which nobody knew about other than myself and the person who did it. It's still something I sort through. It's since I did the therapy for it and really since I dug the roots up, it's been a whole lot harder to ignore the symptoms and the signs of what that did to me psychologically, emotionally, and mentally. But what I did was I stuffed it down. My brain did this thing where it protected me as a small child from the pain that I was in, and I forgot about it. So when I became sexually active at 15, which I was in love, ultimately not dealing with that or not knowing how to deal with it or not understanding what it was has cost me a lot of good love in my life. But I started to remember, I didn't remember details, I just became overwhelmingly aware that something had happened to me, and I started using drugs to cope with it. I ran away from home, I dropped out of school, and I started using drugs to cope with it. Methamphetamines in particular, which is a very psychologically addictive drug. And so the relationship with my trauma and the relationship with the addiction became a really tricky thing. I've had a lot of relationships in my life. I'm speaking about intimate ones. It's been a long journey. I have a very blended family. I have 7 beautiful children. And I like to really touch base on, when I first agreed to do this, and then when the article came out, I was just emotionally overwhelmed, and I started comparing my journey to all of the other ones. And what what happened to me as a child, it taught me that, I wasn't worthy. It taught me that I didn't deserve to be protected, that I was a bad person, that I had asked for some of the things that had happened to me. And this is as a child. And I didn't recognize that as that until I had compiled much more trauma in my addiction and in my quest for trying to figure out what had happened. But it was a horrendous drunken blackout when and I was remembering the drunken blackout when I realized that at 4 years old, when I was being sexually assaulted by a roommate, that I would go behind all of the adults and drink what they were drinking because I saw that it made all of them happy. And so I was able to kind of put together, but this is years into drinking that this happened. It wasn't, like a magic, the first few times I ever blacked out drunk. I mean, at this point in my life, low bottom alcoholics wouldn't let me drink with them. That's pretty sad. And as the years went by and as I kept going from relationship to relationship, I kept noticing a common theme, the addiction and the abuse. And I want to be very clear about this. I wasn't always the one abused. Sometimes I was abusive. And it took a lot of pain to get me to a point where I even wanted to look at it. I walked into my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting about 17 or 18 years ago right here in Cape Girardeau, and a whole different idea for how to live as a productive member of a society that I craved. And I really like what you had to say about Angels Among Us. There's no way that I would be here with any of you today if it weren't for those people. And I found those good people in the trenches of life, down and dirty, dirty garages, abandoned buildings, all kinds of crazy places. And I would not be alive if it weren't for any of those people that simply treated me well out of the kindness of their heart. A peanut butter sandwich, a shower. Those simple things can make a whole world of difference when you've just taken all you can take. And I've attempted suicide before, but not, at a level of this is what I want to do. It was more of I just didn't care if I lived or died. And there were a lot of times where I would hope that the next shot of meth I would do would kill me. I wasn't successful at dying either. And I can relate to wondering why some of the things that I had been through and I came out of. I just recently read a list for the Overdose Awareness Walk here in Cape Girardeau of over 50 names of our community members in the last 5, 6, 7 years that have died to a drug overdose. And, one thing that I really want to say is I worked hard to get my life back together after I went and asked for help, and the state of Missouri decided that that was an invitation to take my children away from me. I can promise you that I was a good mother, even though I was sick. I was a good mother, and they didn't give me the help that I needed. And but I also don't think that I was ready to accept it. I've heard a lot of good things to this evening that touch base on how I did survive. And I can tell you this, it was because I finally accepted the help that was offered. And I finally utilized the resources that are available. They are available. I just had to accept them. And I had to start compartmentalizing what that help looked like. I thought that I should be able to control it. But for me, it was Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous in this community and their unconditional love and acceptance. It didn't matter how many times I'm a binge user, what they call a chronic relapser. over, the 25 plus years that I've battled with substance abuse disorder, I have more accumulated clean time than I do active addiction. And so this last binge that I went on, it really rocked me. I was 1 month shy of 4 months clean. I was a full-time social work student here at SEMO, and after dropping out in my sophomore year in high school, when I did decide to go back, I'd actually made the dean's list my first semester back. I was very dedicated to working with families that were going through the similar things that my family had gone through. I was also working the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and in that program, they have step work, and it's amazing. And I mean, I don't care if you're addicted to strawberries, the 12 steps will help you. I promise. So I really was looking at, and I had come to this point where I had noticed this pattern in my life of, I had different faces to the men in my life, but there were a lot of similarities in who they were and who we were as a couple. And so I decided to get a tubal ligation because I was moving on with my life, and I was healthy, and I had remained abstinent for long enough, and I was ready to, live my life, and I'd gotten a tubal ligation, and I wasn't even in a relationship. And so it was just this really bizarre experience for me that brought up every emotion to not being with my children. Ultimately, I gave up fighting the state of Missouri. I jumped through just about every hoop that they wanted me to jump through, including forcing religion on me in a written service agreement. And I just wanted my kids to move on and be happy. And so we were working to do placement outside of the system. And ultimately, the thing that my early childhood trauma cost me was my right to raise my children. And the journey that I've had with substance abuse disorder and PTSD and domestic violence, that came with that price. And I really feel like the most important thing that any of us can do is to just have these kinds of conversations with our kids and teach them about the dangers, the real dangers of the world, not just a textbook term, but what's really happening out here. And I advocate strongly for harm reduction. I'm working with a group called Recover Out Loud, and we just distributed 160 Narcan kits to this community. This community is definitely in need. We have suffered plenty of losses. Recently, a young 17-year-old boy, and a very tragic loss. And I want to help, because if it weren't for the kindness of people when I was down and out, that I wouldn't be here. And so I relapsed after the tubal ligation. I took 2 pain pills. I was on academic warning, and I had this algebra test, and I was giving this friend of mine a ride, and I was trying to get her into treatment. And I just got this crazy idea, and I couldn't stop crying because I was an emotional mess. I had just got this major procedure done, and I was still trying to pretend like I wasn't upset. And this was before I knew that it was okay to say I need a mental health day. And that's okay to say today, and I do that a lot, especially in 2020. I got this crazy idea that I would do a little meth so I could go to school and take my test and get what I needed to get done and put my emotions aside. And I didn't follow through with what I had learned, and I did a little meth, and that little meth lasted for 3 years. And I'd found myself in the worst binge of my substance use career that I'd ever experienced. And right here on these streets, I wasn't homeless. I had a home to go to, a very nice one. I just couldn't do meth there. And, in the beginning, it was this bullheaded, arrogant, I really honestly believed that I could control it. And I made myself think I was having fun. I'd walked out on my kids again. I fought with the people that were taking care of them in my absence. I dropped out of college a week later. I fell asleep in my social work class. Everything. And it just came with this unbelievable amount of shame. And people from the program would try to reach out to me, and they would say things to me that I would twist and turn, and I knew that they loved me and that they were worried. But they would say things like, you know what you need to do. And I just didn't have it in me. I also engaged in the most abusive relationship of my life. I really, truly, honestly, other than the childhood abuse and trauma that I faced, I really didn't know what abuse was until this relationship. And when you throw in the weird psychological effects that malnourishment, trauma, PTSD, and then the chemicals on top of it, I was not well at all. I had a lot of seizure-like episodes. If I wasn't up, and there were times where I would do more meth because I wasn't safe at the house that I needed to go to sleep in. There was times where I would do more meth because that's what they would give me instead of buying me a cheeseburger. It was a really sick place to be. And I had gotten so close to that dark place in my mind that I had slipped away to as a little girl, that I really, really realized that I needed to work on that. And those moments are indescribable. I had little faith, there were those few people that would be there for me, but even they were caught up in the drug addiction, and I would always be so much more compassionate for their struggles than my own. And I was arrested trying to get away from that abusive person, and I went to jail, and I had wrote a statement on him that day. We'd been stopped by the police or approached by the police many times. He was on parole, and they would never do anything about it. And he would basically tell them he was on drugs, and they would never do anything about it. I'd also become very paranoid that the entire community was out to get me. And that's to put it mildly. I couldn't begin to open that door verbally to illustrate. If I was a painter, I might be able to paint that picture for you, but there's no words to describe that kind of hell. There's no record of the statement that I had wrote on this man that simply would not leave me alone. That is scary. That is very scary. So I got out of jail and I relapsed right away. Of course, that added to, oh crap, I almost cussed, sorry. Oh crap, now I've got to watch out for my PO. And so that went on for a while. I had attempted treatment just because I knew that would make my PO happy. I've been to treatment approximately 18 times, and only the last time did I go because I wanted to, because I needed to. Every other time it was for someone else, a judge, a caseworker, an angry partner, or, it was always for something else other than for me to figure out why I keep doing drugs. So this last time I had decided to really look at that, and I'm just going to put it in, it's a basic math. If I have this many relationships and they're all the same. I'm the common denominator. And so, and I can't even, when people would tell me after the article came out that they were proud of me, I couldn't understand it. I read all of the other survivor stories and looked at their accomplishments, and I thought, what do I do? What have I accomplished? I didn't get high today. But that is what I am recovering from. And that is that childhood trauma that made me believe that I wasn't worthy, that made me believe that I was comfortable in pain, that I deserved it. And so I engaged in what's called EMDR therapy, and I apologize. I don't know the technical term for what that stands for, but basically I just revisited with an excellent therapist 3 times a week for a couple of months what I went through as a child. And I thought I was going to come out of that and it's done. But actually it really kind of made it trickier for me, because now I'm aware. And so now I know what a trigger, I know what happens. I know that this is a PTSD, or that answer is trauma response. And so my initial reaction to reading the rest of the stories was trauma response, that I absolutely am worthy to be up here. And the common bond is pain. And I tell you this, I spent this entire summer on leave for PTSD symptoms that I absolutely cannot control. I'm working on it, but I absolutely cannot control it. And recognizing it doesn't help. I mean, it's nice to know technically, clinically, what to call it, but I feel crazy a lot. And, you know, I want my pain to have a purpose if it can help one single person. And I encourage parents to go home and have just these great, big, wide open talks with your children. There's no reason not to. And I think ultimately the greatest tragedy that I faced in my life was not feeling protected as a child. And the price that I paid to come to terms with that was the right to raise my children. And so I encourage any of you, if you're dealing with a person who suffers from this, they're not having fun. There was this great misconception when I went out on this last binge that I was having fun, that I was just partying it up. And I promise you, I was not having fun. I tried, but I wasn't having fun. I was dying inside. And I think the biggest thing that I did to help myself was to finally say, I can't do this. I need help. And this community has an amazing recovery community. And they're out there. All you have to do is reach out. And November 21st, I will have 3 years clean. And I'm very proud of that. November 21st, I'll have 4 years clean from the lifestyle, which is the most important decision I make every day, is to, and it's hard because I'm fighting for people that are still caught in that lifestyle. And so I kind of have to reach over there a little bit, but I have to be very careful. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. Thanks for having me. Thank you all for sharing your story. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Did anyone have a question? Yes, ma'am.
What advice would you give to family members who love someone who is, suffering from addiction? Like, as far as
The best, that's hard because you need a different kind of help than they do. There are lots of programs, you know, there's Al-Anon, there's things. I personally, my advice to someone who is not caught up in, because that's very rare to see someone who's clean and sober that deals with someone who isn't. But if that is the case, my advice would be take care of yourself, because, you know, if you go down that spiral with them, you know, it was always explained to me in recovery, because I always want to fix everybody else before myself, and that's trauma response too. But I always want to put your problems before mine. Number one, because I'm lazy and I don't like to deal with all my problems, but also because it's painful. So it was easier to look at everybody else's stuff. But it was explained to me once that, you know, like when you're on the airplane and they're talking about if it's about to crash, and they always tell you to put your oxygen mask on before you secure your child's. Obviously, because you won't be able to put your child's on if you can't breathe. And it's kind of the same thing. The biggest thing is to understand that they can't just stop. Don't tell them to just stop. That's another big reason why I'm here tonight, is because I really want to break the stigma of substance abuse disorder. And I really want to break the stigma of recovery as well. I mean, recovery isn't just one thing. I'm pretty sure we are all recovering from something in our life. And put them in touch with people that want to help. You know, reach out, Recover Out Loud. We're a nonprofit. We want to meet the addict where they're at. We don't want to wait for them to get a judge to give them a referral to go to treatment and make them go to AA or NA. We want to give them hope, so that when and if there's a lot of us out here who were really good at not breaking the, I mean, I didn't break the, I broke the law because I was using drugs, but I didn't steal your car. I didn't steal your clothes. I didn't try to find somebody's checks. You know, I was sick on drugs. I wasn't a bad person. And a lot of times people aren't getting help when they need it. They're getting helped when they're forced to. And a lot of times that comes with a whole slew of other stuff that seems to take priority. And staying out of jail or prison is usually one of them. Reach out is the biggest thing. And just to let them know they're not alone. They're not alone. Millions of people suffer from substance abuse disorder and PTSD. I think those things kind of go hand in hand. You know, mental illness, substance abuse disorder is a mental illness. It's not a moral deficiency. I hope that helped. Anybody else have any questions? Thank you all so much for having me.
Hi. I'm the last one. Try to have you guys out of here. I'm Tamitha Crowson. I made some notes. I might need to look at them. I'm Tamitha Crowson, and I am currently the fitness director for 180 Fitness, and I run a program called Boot Camp Challenge here in Cape Girardeau. I consider my life's mission to awaken the brave and courageous parts of people and encourage them to do the scary thing. And I happen to do that from the platform of fitness. I'm here tonight to do that very thing, only this time my platform is my own life. And I hope that you'll leave here with the knowledge that we're both the same and the belief that you're capable of more than you ever imagined. Most of you know me, if you know me, as a personal trainer, fitness instructor. My son's friends know me as the buff mom. I hear through the grapevine that some people think I'm intimidating, although I'm not sure why. But if you could see inside, you would see the beginnings of me, which was a very shy and awkward child. And I didn't really have any friends. When I was 9, my mom divorced my dad, or they divorced. It was a very amicable thing, but I had a sister who was younger than me, and when my mom remarried, I gained a stepsister that was older and another stepbrother that was younger. So I went from the oldest child and the boss to the middle child and lost. And so that was a very hard time for me, and I think it kind of reverberated for years in my life as I struggled to find my place in my family and in life in general. I can remember the second day of 7th grade, I was really tired of not having any friends. And I literally didn't have any friends. I was just so shy and always, felt like I didn't measure up. And I got tired of feeling that way. And so I told myself, okay, no matter what it takes, I am going to fit in. And so the second day of 7th grade, I walked up to kind of a circle of kids that were standing there talking, and I basically just forced my way into this conversation. And from that moment on, I became a extrovert, an extroverted introvert, I guess you would say. And what happened was I started doing a lot of things that I thought the cool kids were doing, but they weren't actually doing. I imagined them to be these big partiers and, sex and boys and all this kind of stuff. So I started to engage in some of those behaviors, not realizing that it was a bunch of talk or, my imagination. So that kind of took me down a road that was kind of dark at times. And, I was having, boyfriends that were way older than me, and some were kind of pretty crazy. I ended up running away my junior year of high school. I was gone the whole first semester of my junior year with one of my crazy boyfriends. And I got back and decided that I was going to, my grades had dropped, and so I wanted to go to college. So I buckled down and ended up getting a 4.0 my senior year. So that was great, but then I went to college. And college was a lot of fun. And it was a little too fun. And I went a year, and then in Springfield, and I transferred to Mizzou, because that's where my boyfriend at the time was going. And Mizzou really got the best of me. And my grades were okay, but my social life was out of control. And I was doing a lot of drinking, a lot of partying, and ended up having to drop out of school and live back home for a little while. And about that time, the guy I was dating said he had gotten a graduate assistantship at Mississippi State. And so he said, why don't you just come with me? I said, okay, that would be a really good idea. So I did. And while I was there, I lived there for a couple months and joined a gym. And, as a kid, I was not at all athletic, at all. Joined a gym and decided that I was going to start working out. And so I did, and I fell in love with it. In the process, I also picked up an eating disorder, because sometimes when you diet, it can actually change your brain chemistry. And so I believe that's what happened. I went on a pretty strict diet and started losing weight. And before you know it, I was doing this weird thing where I would eat broccoli with ketchup on it and count my calories. And then I would go to the gym like 3 times a day to try to burn off all the calories that I had assumed that I had eaten that day. And it got to be a real problem. And I was finding myself I was cranky. I had no drive to do anything. I just felt awful. My mind was completely occupied all the time with this obsession of how my thighs looked or how my stomach looked. And it was not a fun place to live. And I can remember people coming up to me and they'd say, I wish I was as dedicated as you are. And I would think, no, you really don't. This is not fun. So somehow, it took a long time, but over the years, I was able to, and this was, a lot of stuff was going on in this time span, but I'll just stick with this one little thing and then I'll kind of go back. But I eventually was able to learn that it didn't really matter what I looked like. And this is something that I repeated to myself, oh my gosh, I don't even know how many times. I would say it out loud. I can remember saying it to myself driving down the road. Tamitha, no one is going to love you any more or any less because of 10 pounds in either direction. And I said that to myself over and over so many times that I actually started to believe it. And that's one thing that I tell a lot of my clients now that I find maybe have a little bit of, too much of a mental obsession with the scale or their weight. So that was tough, but it wasn't as tough as some of the other things that I would experience. So I ended up living in Mississippi for about 10 years, met and married my first husband there, divorced him. met and married my second husband there, and we ended up, who was an addict, by the way, we ended up moving back to Missouri, at which time we conceived our first child that I miscarried. And it was very early. It was like 12 weeks into the pregnancy, so I didn't really have much of an emotional attachment. But I remember it being a pretty tough time. So after that, it wasn't long, and I started trying for another one. He was just kind of half on board, but luckily I didn't need him all that much for it. So I ended up getting pregnant with our first son, Blake, and that was in December. He was born in December of 2001. About 2 weeks later, his dad, my husband, went to jail, and I think at that time he ended up going to prison. And so, not long after that, I think Blake was about 6 weeks old, I found out I was already pregnant again with our second son, Evan. And so I moved back home, and I was there with a newborn and a 10-month-old. And that was a pretty hard year, as you can imagine. So I ended up divorcing that one and met my third husband, who was a very successful businessman, and he's also a very functional and angry alcoholic. So we moved to Joplin, and I was, of course, brought my two boys. At that time, they were like 3 and 4. And we, had, from the outside, quite a nice life. But from the inside, it was not a nice life. I was really wilting inside, and I can remember, he was very controlling and abusive, not in a physical way, but in very much of a emotional way. And eventually, the drinking got so bad, and I got tired of it, and I could see that it was not going to end well for me, that I was starting to, engage in some behaviors that were definitely not healthy. And so I took the boys and we left, and we went into a shelter and stayed there for a few months, couple months, I guess. And I ended up going back home again. So during this time, I had decided to divorce my third husband. I really like weddings, by the way. I just don't like marriage that much, evidently. So we got divorced, and I met somebody else. And this guy I was very much in love with. But I didn't really open up to him about who I was and what I'd been through and the things I'd struggled with. And he was very wealthy and very successful and good guy. But I hid a lot from him because I wanted to appear as a certain kind of person, and I wasn't that certain kind of person, and it backfired. It was really my first, and to say it out loud, it sounds kind of, she broke. It was hard. It was really my, even after all those divorces, it was my first true heartbreak. And I had never, and I think probably because of this reason, that I had never let myself experience grief before. I had always had somebody else in the wings, or I had some kind of substance to kind of help me through, but I had never just gone in and hurt bad before. And during this time, I had rekindled a relationship with my father, who I've been not estranged, but just, we weren't very close. And he spent hours and hours on the phone with me, helping me to see the truth, which was that the breakup was not because this person wouldn't support me. It was because I did it wrong. I was not honest and I was not truthful. And to own that was one of the hardest things that I ever did. And it was one of the most valuable things that I ever did because it allowed me to truly move forward. And that's kind of one of the things that I talk a lot about now is owning your mistakes. And I feel like without doing that, you're pretty much dead in the water. So it was during this breakup, and it was before the whole father thing. Well, I guess it was around the same time, but during the end of the breakup, it was on again, off again for 2 years. It was really painful. I ended up deciding that I just was done, and I had caused, the people in my life. I mean, I'm skipping a lot here, but I had caused the people in my life a fair amount of pain, and it was just one seemed like one thing after another, and so I attempted to end my life, and I took a whole bunch of blood pressure medication, a lot of it, and one of my kids found me before it was too late, and I went to the hospital and woke up and thought, what the hell? And so, I had to come to terms with the fact that, okay, I guess I'm going to do this, and I've got to figure out a way to be less concerned with how I appear and more concerned with who I really am. So around that time, after all that happened, I ended up coming to Cape Girardeau, and I came here without my boys because I didn't really have anything. I had started over about 3 or 4 times, and this was one of those times. And so I came down here, and I had gotten a degree from Mississippi State back when I was there in fitness management. Ended up working in the field for a long time. But by this time, I had kind of let my certification lapse. Well, I didn't kind of. I actually did let it lapse. And so I came down here, and I decided to get back into the fitness industry. And so I got my certification again and was working part-time for the first speaker we heard in here, Christine, as a fitness attendant in the fitness room. And started to realize that my connection with people was the most important thing when it came to how good of a life I was going to have. It wasn't really what I could acquire, it was how I related to other people, and the willingness to become vulnerable and that was how I connected. That's how I figured out that if I can show who I really am and be honest with people and let them see who I am, there's really no end to the kind of human connections I can make. And so that's when I kind of started to develop this platform about helping people see their brave and courageous side, because I had to do a lot of scary things. I ended up starting my own fitness online fitness business, T. Krause and Fitness. That went on for a couple years. I ended up starting the local boot camp challenge, and that grew to be, it's the biggest one in the nation of its kind. And so these were all really scary things for me. And so I did all this, and my boys came down, and it was great, and things were going well, and they were flourishing. And Blake, by this time, he came down here. I was 13, 14, something like that. Became a real very proficient snare player in his band and traveling, competing drum corps. So things were looking up. I met somebody who is now I've been with for 6 years, and he is my life partner, and really the healthiest relationship I've ever had, based on trust and honesty. And so I got this call to do this talk back in, I guess it was December or November of last year, and gladly agreed, willingly agreed. Not realizing that I was going to have to still survive the hardest thing in my life, which was the suicide death of Blake in April of this year. And that was threw all of us for a loop. He crashed his car into a light pole over a rocky cliff at 75 miles an hour without braking. And I know this because I have the Life 360 app that, the paid version, which shows you if your kid is slammed on the brakes or if it's accelerated, how many times they've used their phone. There was some other things too that pointed that out, but that, you can take all of the things that I experienced, my own suicide attempt, all my failed relationships, my, struggles with drugs and drinking, and, none of that. That's why and homelessness, when I saw the article and I was like, oh, to me that's just like such a small thing. It was just so back there, and because I just didn't have a place to stay, so I just stayed at this other place for a little while, and they helped me, and then I was done, and so it just dwarfs everything else. So his brother Evan, who just turned 18 yesterday, lost his best friend and his at the time really only friend, and I lost my firstborn son, and it was something. There's been other mothers in here talk about losing their children, and it's a special kind of pain that really sometimes I'm just walking along and it'll hit me that my son is dead, and it's a shock. It's just like it's fresh every time. What it's taught me, I don't know what it's taught me yet. It's only been 6 months. It's taught me that I can survive anything. Really, I truly believe that. And I don't want to go too long, but I will say that one of the most significant, I miss him so bad. You know, I do, and I like to talk about him. But I know you guys didn't know him. So I'll just say that he was a special guy. And he had this tattoo on his hand, and I have it on my hand now, and so does my other son. It says breathe. And he hadn't had it very long. But after he died, then my other son, Evan, went to the same tattoo artist to get a matching tattoo. And so he went in and he asked, he wanted the same font and everything. And the tattoo artist said, well, he didn't really, we didn't use a particular font. That he looked through like 12 or 13 or 14 fonts, but couldn't really find anything he wanted. So we just used a basic font. But the reason he couldn't find anything was because he wanted there to be imperfections in the lettering. And she said he was really adamant about this, that I not make it perfect. And so she didn't make it perfect. They just used a basic font, and she went in and she made some very small adjustments to like the E and the N so that it wouldn't be just right. And so when I heard that, I thought that was pretty amazing, because to me, and I'll never know his exact reason for doing this, but to me what it said is that even the things that are normally appear perfect have imperfections, and that if we can embrace those and learn to love them and breathe through them, then it makes us who we are, and that is a unique and special person, just as he was and just as I am. And so I carry that with me, and I don't have any other tats, but I remember when I was about 23, I wanted one. I couldn't think of anything that was important enough to me to get on my body forever. And so it took me 51 years, and I finally thought of something. And so we all have the same tattoo now. So anyway, that's really what I've got. I feel like inside we literally, we truly all struggle with the same insecurities and the same types of feelings. And they may have different faces and take on different forms, but inside we are all the same. And the sooner we can connect on that level, the sooner we can all live a more full and wholehearted life and do that scary thing, because it's really not so scary when you realize that that everybody experiences the same thing. So that's all I have. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and have a good night. Thanks.
Thank you all so incredibly much for being here tonight. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for listening. And thank you just for being who you are in the world. We really appreciate you all being here tonight. So thank you.